I haven't bought a flavoured yoghurt cup since I left, and I don't plan to. 24 grams of added sugar in that little cup, more than some candy bars carry, and Carrageenan sitting right there as the thickener, an additive that research keeps linking to gut inflammation. My grandmother cultured milk into yoghurt with 2 ingredients. We didn't read labels. We didn't need to. We made it ourselves. Picture a refrigerator door lined with little plastic cups, rows of them, like candy in a drugstore. Strawberry, vanilla, blueberry, peach, smiling fruit printed on every lid. That is what flavoured yoghurt is dressed up to be. A health food. The thing a tired parent hands over without a second thought, because surely yoghurt is yoghurt. Surely it is the safe choice in that whole cold case. Stay with me, because what I culture instead, in a jar sitting on my own counter, costs somewhere around 35 cents a serving. And by the time we are through, you will understand exactly why that gap between the two exists. Now, I want to ask you something honestly before we go any further. How many of these cups pass through your kitchen in a week? 2? 5? A whole case bought every Sunday for the children's lunches, restocked without a second thought because it has always just been part of the list. I ask because most people have never once sat down and actually multiplied the daily habit out across the days in a year. So hold your own number in your head while I walk through mine, and see how close the two of us land. Here is where it gets interesting. A single flavoured cup runs somewhere between $1.50 and $2 at most stores, a figure still worth checking against whatever the shelf actually shows right now, so take it as a working number rather than something carved in stone. One person, buying 1 cup a day, lands somewhere between $500 and $700 across a single year. A family of 4 doing the same thing every single day is closer to $2,200 to nearly $3,000 for yogurt. Not for anything exotic, not for a luxury, for yogurt. And you are not simply spending that money on a creamy breakfast that disappears in a few bites. You are spending it to deliver 24 grams of added sugar into a small body, sometimes a grandchild's body, inside a package decorated specifically to look wholesome and safe. That sugar is not an accident, and it is not incidental to the product. It is doing the job that flavour used to do honestly, the way fruit and a little sweetness once did on their own. Plain cultured milk is tart, sharp even in its natural state. So somewhere along the manufacturing line, a decision was made that instead of letting real fruit and a spoon of honey carry the flavour the way they always had, sugar would carry it instead. Sugar, listed once under its own plain name, and very often listed again a few lines down under a syrup or a concentrate, because that is simply how an ingredient label is permitted to read. You are paying nearly $2 for a single serving, and a meaningful share of what you are actually buying is dissolved sugar wearing a dairy costume. And the sugar is only half of what is sitting in that cup. Many of these products also lean on Carrageenan to keep that smooth, pudding-like texture from separating before it ever reaches your spoon. A thickener pulled from seaweed, and one that a growing body of research keeps circling back to in connection with inflammation along the gut lining. I want to be careful here and say plainly that I am not a doctor, and I am not telling you what will happen inside your own body, because I cannot know that. But if you are someone who already deals with a stomach that does not forgive easily, or joints that ache more on some mornings than others, that is not a detail to simply wave past on your way to the next aisle. You are paying for the convenience of a shelf-stable, spoon-ready cup, and part of what makes it shelf-stable and spoon-ready is an additive your own grandmother would never have recognised as food, let alone trusted near a child's breakfast table. None of this happened because some dairy somewhere set out to do harm to anyone. It happened because mass production needs a product that can survive a long truck ride, sit in a warehouse, wait out weeks in a refrigerated case, and still look perfect the moment the lid finally comes off. Plain cultured milk simply does not behave that way over that kind of timeline left to its own devices. So sugar gets added to make the flavour land without real fruit doing the actual work, and a thickener gets added to make the texture hold without real time doing the work it once did. Not because anyone along that chain failed, because an entire system was built around shelf life and shipping distance, and the body eating the result at the end of it was never really part of that equation in the first place. Let me hold one of these cups up so you can see exactly what I mean. Cold plastic against my palm, condensation already beading along the side from sitting out while we talk. Peel the foil lid back, and there is that bright, almost too smooth pink surface, glossier than any real strawberry has ever managed to be on its own. Turn it over, and the price sticker is right there beneath the rim. Somewhere close to $2 for this one cup, for this one serving, for a few spoonfuls that will be gone in under a minute. Flip it again and read the ingredient list along the side, printed small enough that almost no one standing in a hurry in the dairy aisle ever actually stops to read it. Sugar. Then, several lines further down, sugar again, wearing a different name. Then Carrageenan, plain as anything, sitting in the thickener position it has held in plenty of these formulas for years now. Though exactly which brands still rely on it as of right now is worth checking before you trust any single label completely. This is what the ingredient list shows. Not a guess, not an opinion. What is printed right there? In type small enough that it seems almost designed not to be read by anyone in a hurry. If you're the kind of person who reads the side of the jar before you ever read the front, you already know what is coming next, because you have stood in that very same aisle running this very same math, wondering whether there was a version of this that did not force you to choose between convenience and actually trusting what sits inside the cup. There is. And it costs less per serving than the tip you would leave a stranger for handing you a cup of coffee. Yogurt itself is older than any of this packaging by thousands of years. Warm milk, a living culture stirred patiently in, time and warmth doing the rest of the work without any help from a factory. In farming communities that kept dairy cattle, including the Amish communities of Holmes County where I was raised, cultured milk was never a specialty item or an occasional treat. It was Tuesday. Clabbered milk, fermented cream, plain yogurt, all of it daily kitchen work, taught hand over hand the way most real skills were taught in that life, without a recipe card, without measuring anything more precise than a cupped palm or a texture you simply learn to recognize by feel. My grandmother made this the very same way her own mother had, long before any flavoured cup with a cartoon strawberry on the lid ever existed anywhere. This recipe hasn't changed in well over 100 years. That's the point. It never once needed Carrageenan to hold itself together, because nobody was ever asking it to survive a truck route across several states. It only needed to survive a single quiet afternoon on a warm stove ledge. And it always, always did. Here is the whole of it, because it really is this short. You warm whole milk on the stove until it reaches a true simmer, just shy of a full boil, and then you let it cool back down until it is warm to the touch, but no longer hot enough to scald a wrist dipped in to test it. Into that warm milk, you stir 2 spoonfuls of plain yogurt that still carries a live culture. This is the only ingredient actually doing work beyond the milk itself, the small living bridge that carries one batch forward into the next. You pour the whole mixture into a clean jar, cover it loosely, and tuck it somewhere warm and undisturbed, near the back of a stove that still holds a little heat, or wrapped snugly in a towel inside a cooler. And then you leave it alone for roughly 8 hours, very often overnight, while the rest of the house sleeps around it. In the morning you have something thick, faintly tangy, with that particular cultured smell rising the moment you lift the cloth off the jar. Not sour exactly, more alive than that. The same smell that once meant breakfast was nearly ready in a kitchen that did not own a single packaged thing. Sweeten it at the table with a spoonful of honey and whatever fruit happens to be on hand, fresh or thawed from frozen, and that is the whole of it. 4 ingredients, counting the fruit you stir in at the end. 3 real steps before that, and not one of them difficult. I will tell you honestly, the first few times I tried this entirely on my own, away from the farm with no one standing over my shoulder to correct me, I let the milk get far too hot before I added the starter, and it killed the very culture I was relying on without my realizing it. I ended up with warm, slightly sour milk and nothing more. No thickening at all. And I genuinely could not understand why until someone finally explained that live culture cannot survive milk that is still scalding hot. Once I learned to actually wait until it cooled to a comfortable warmth, the same gentle warmth as a baby's bottle tested against the inside of a wrist, it worked every single time after that, without fail. Now, I will not pretend this replaces the store cup in every single way, because it does not, and overselling it to you would not serve either of us. This version does not arrive sealed in an individually sized cup. You can simply toss into a lunch bag without a second thought on a rushed morning. It needs a refrigerator, a jar, and roughly a week before you will want to start the next batch, since homemade yogurt simply does not carry the long shelf life that the commercial version was specifically engineered to have from the very start. It takes a real stretch of unattended time, most of it overnight, true, but it is not instant the way peeling back a foil lid is instant. And you do need 1 cup of existing live yogurt sitting on hand to start that very first batch, which means 1 small initial purchase before the cycle of homemade batches can begin to run entirely on its own from there forward. But here is the larger thing, sitting underneath all of it. That bright little cup with the smiling fruit on the lid was never really selling you yogurt at all. It was selling you the idea that convenience and trust could simply be the very same purchase, that you would never once need to read past the cartoon printed on the front. A jar of warm, clabbering milk on the back of a stove does not need a label at all, because you stood there yourself and watched every single thing that went into it with your own 2 eyes. That is the whole difference, and it has nothing to do with nostalgia and everything to do with simply knowing. Tell me in 1 word how often your own family goes through these cups in a week. I am genuinely curious how close the numbers run to mine. So close those 2 loops with me, the way I promised at the start. 24 grams of added sugar sitting inside a cup that can run a family $2,000 or more across a single year. That was never a fair trade to begin with, not by any measure. And what I make instead, on my own counter, with 2 ingredients and 8 quiet, unattended hours, lands at somewhere around 35 cents a serving. The very same cultured milk my grandmother made, long before any of this ever existed. I haven't bought a flavoured yogurt cup since I left. I don't plan to start now.